The White House has condemned the loss of life of dozens of civilians as a result of an Israeli airstrike in Rafah at the weekend. But Washington says it doesn't believe Israel's offensive in Gaza has violated President Joe Biden's declared red line for withholding future transfers of weapons to Israel. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that Israel must outline in any case its strategy for bringing the war to an end.
In the absence of a plan for the day after, there won't be a day after. A plan for the day after that does not leave Israel responsible for Gaza, which it says it does not want to be. But if it is, it will simply have an enduring insurgency on its hands for as far as one can see into the future. Or not, if not, Hamas will be left in charge, which is unacceptable. Or if not, we'll have chaos, lawlessness, and a vacuum that eventually will be filled again by Hamas, or maybe something, if it's possible to imagine, even worse.
And we can now speak to Laura Blumenfeld. She's a Middle East analyst and New York Times bestselling author who joins us from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Laura. Joe Biden has said in the past that the full-scale Israeli military operation in Gaza would cross a red line. Is there any clear evidence, though, that such a red line really exists?
Well, you saw what happened today. I mean, the White House described the latest unfortunate loss of civilian lives as heartbreaking, but not red line breaking. And I think if anybody smudged that red line this week, it would be the ICJ. By allowing a little bit of ambiguity in their language, they talked about an incursion into Rafah might, they used the word might, endanger the Palestinians there. And Israel, with its Talmudic interpretation, their lawyers quickly got busy saying that, we won't cause a great loss of life, or in this case, they were talking about genocide. And that left just enough ambiguity. We heard, John Kirby from the White House say, do not smash into the major population centers with a major ground offensive. And so the Israelis were saying, we'll proceed, with a scalpel, not a bone saw.
Mm-hmm. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Council advisor, argued last week that there was no mathematical formula to assessing how big an IDF operation is. So the scale will always be subjective. Where do you see the administration actually drawing its lines?
Well, I think there are two important things for the administration, not only in terms of the relationship with Israel and Gaza, the Palestinians, but their position in the world. And the first thing is leadership. I mean, we are not a go-it-alone nation. Netanyahu said, if we have to fight alone, we will with our fingernails. Biden represents alliances, decency versus revenge. So I think the most important thing is where we can maintain our leadership and our alliances with the West and with other, friendly nations. The second most important thing is that we maintain our moral high ground. That's very important to us. How do you fight bad and stay good? And I think if we see that kind of erosion of the morality in the battlefield in Gaza, that's where we will draw the line. That's where we always have. And that's, in a way, also some of the lessons that we're trying to learn and mistakes we're trying to make up for in terms of our behavior in Iraq and Afghanistan.
But, saying that there's no real way to assess how big this is, using words like smashing into Rafah, which Israel is probably not going to do because they know that the world is watching. Is that not a get out of your obligations free card in a way?
Not at all. I actually think that although we're not watching it, I think the United States actually has Israel by the scruff of the neck right now. I mean, as I heard from your previous report about Ukraine, in some sense, guns are the love language of America to other nations, and Israel is heavily dependent on guns and weapons. You saw, again, after this tragic fire in the tent encampment of Palestinians on Sunday night, the Israelis were quick to point out that they used the smallest munitions available, a 37-pound bomb. I'm sure that was because the United States was saying, it's our guns, it's our ground rules. And so I think that even diplomatically at the UN, I mean, now there's going to be a UN Security Council resolution to condemn and to halt the incursion into Rafah. I'm sure the United States is going to exact a price from Israel if they are going to abstain or veto. Actually, I think more likely was what Israel is going to be looking for. And they're going to say to Israel, okay, maybe we'll give you that veto at the UN, but let's see some flexibility on the hostage deal, which the United States really does see as unlocking the whole mess and the key to moving forward. Or perhaps, with aid, we'd like to see those 350 trucks, which you promised us, at least 100 trucks coming in from the north. So I think there are ways that they're using their leverage as just behind the scenes, because Israel is absolutely depend on the United States at this point.
Yeah, this is an election year, and there are many people in the U.S. that would like to see the Biden administration take a more robust stance towards Israel. There's also people who are saying that, the administration is not doing enough to support Israel in this. So I want to know from you, to what extent is Joe Biden's policy determined by those domestic political pressures? And is he always going to lose support, whatever he does?
I mean, great point. The domestic pressure on him cuts both ways. In fact, one of the most interesting demonstrations I saw on a college campus was where you had the pro-Palestinian protesters chanting and the counter-protesters chanting the same thing, which was F Biden. I think for the president, the most important thing is not to look weak. Weak is kind of code for old, right? Because that's one of the biggest problems for him. He's got to show that he's sticking with his ally. We saw Nikki Haley, who was potentially going to go into a Trump administration, over there in Israel, writing on a shell, an artillery shell that Israel's planning to use, finish them. So the good news for Biden, however, is finish them is what Nikki Haley is saying now. But if you recall, Donald Trump said, finish it. He doesn't want this war to go on either. I mean, as of now, it's kind of been a sloppy, slow, and lonely kind of fight. And Trump does not want to see that on his watch either.
That was Middle East analyst Laura Blumenfeld. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Great to be here.